Namah Shri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suraye Satchit Sukha Swarupaya Swami Tapaharini. Revered Swami Nikhileshwaranji Maharaj and other respected monks assembled here. My pranams to all of them. And on the dais, Shri Suresh Pandit and Shri Sharat Vivek Sagar. My heartfelt regards to both of you and all of you, my dear sisters and brothers. My regards and good wishes to all of you. I have been asked to share my ideas on the subject of servant leadership and Swami Vivekananda. At the very outset, I want to very sincerely admit one point, and that is, truly speaking, I do not consider myself eligible to talk on this subject of leadership and management because this has never been my area of specialization. So I do not consider that I am eligible to share or give some discourse on this profound subject, which is a subject which is very popular nowadays. But it has been, I feel, the affection of Nikhileshwaranji. Because of his affection, he has asked me to come here and share some of my thoughts on this subject. So I really am not an expert on the field of leadership and management, but definitely when it comes to Vivekananda, I can definitely do some justice as far as Vivekananda is, what we can learn from Swami Vivekananda. When we talk about servant leadership and Swami Vivekananda, let us just go into the history of this concept of servant leadership. To make it very simple and brief, because we don't have much time, this concept of servant leadership, it came to prominence in the 1970s. In the 1970s, the great Western thinker, who is nowadays considered to be a great management expert all over the world and who is very strongly followed, his name is Robert Greenleaf. He, for the first time in the 1970s, propounded this idea of servant leadership through his article, Servant as Leader. Prior to this, the world had not, in a very general sense and in a very popular sense, known about such an idea of how a servant can be a leader. So in a way, it was a very pioneering idea in the 1970s. But this idea also has got its history. Because Robert Greenleaf, the person who actually propounded and kept this idea before the entire world community, he was inspired by the famous German Nobel literate. His name was Hermann Hesse. Hermann Hesse, in the 1930s, he wrote a wonderful book called The Journey to the East. The Journey to the East and Siddhartha, two books. Now this German Hesse, he had visited India in 1911 and he had a very close encounter with Indian spiritual ideas and he was deeply influenced by the Hinduism and Buddhism especially, and he was very much familiar with Bhagavad Gita, it is said. And after having come in close contact with Indian spiritual ideas, the Eastern mysticism, German Hesse, in 1932, he wrote his wonderful book, The Journey to the East. And in this book, Hermann Hesse narrates a mythical story, a story of a group of people who are traveling in India. And the story is very interesting in the sense that there Hermann Hesse says that a group of people who were traveling in India. In that group, they were in search of truth. The entire group was in search of truth. And in that group, there was one servant who was very passionately serving everybody in that group. He was doing his role in a very exemplary fashion, always constantly taking care of others, deeply concerned with the requirements of each and every person of that group. And in this way, that servant was very deeply involved with what each and every person of that group actually needed at the right time. Now, it so happened that after some days, suddenly, this servant, he disappeared from that group for some reasons. And the moment he disappeared from the group, it so happened that this entire group which was going together, it fell into total disarray. The group disintegrated. And when the group disintegrated, at that time, they realized that actually the leader of this group was none other than this servant. It was this servant who was actually holding this entire group together. So, Robert Greenleaf, who propounded this idea of servant leadership before the entire world, he got this inspiration from the story which is narrated in this beautiful book called The Journey to the East, written by Hermann Hesse. And Hermann Hesse derives his inspiration from the great Indian spiritual ideas found in Hinduism and Buddhism. Now, I want to tell all of you that in 1970s, the idea of servant leadership was kept before the entire world. Nearly 80 years before that, and almost 30 to 40 years before Hermann Hesse, Swami Vivekananda was already talking about servant leadership in his writings, in his letters, and even in his speeches. If you read his letters, Swami Vivekananda's letters, which is full of inspiration, full of fire for the young generation, there you will find any number of such instances where he refers to this idea of what servant leadership is and what servant leadership can accomplish in life. Now, usually what happens? What do we really find in leaders? To put it in a very simple fashion, as I said in the beginning, I am not an expert in leadership and management, I admit that, but in my very lay and amateurish understanding, I feel that a leader is a person who has got a vision. He has got a vision, and the vision is very clear in his mind. The vision can be anything. I'm just talking about a person who has got a foresight into what he wants certain things to come about. And he has a very clean understanding of that. The second point is that this leader should be able to communicate that vision to his people. This is very important. The art of communication, an art of making the other people convinced about what vision he has got and motivating them in that direction. And the third point about this great leader, whoever is a great leader, is that his capability to translate this vision into reality. How is he? He has to create a system in and through which he should be in a position to translate his vision into reality. This is the final, I should say, the culmination of the leadership role, which is a total package from having a vision down to translation of that vision into actuality. So any person who has got these three things, we can, in a very general fashion, we can say that he has got some leadership qualities. Now, usually what happens in the traditional understanding of what leadership is, the usual method which is employed to accomplish this thing is the method of using institutional power and rules and controlling the subordinates. This is the traditional top to bottom hierarchy system where somebody is sitting on the top. He may be having a vision, whatever that vision is. It can be economical, it can be something else. But whatever vision he has, in order to translate that into reality, he uses his institutional power, he uses coercion, he uses different other tactics, and somehow his aim is manage to get results. He wants results by hook or crook, and he has got no concern about what is the status of the employees or what are the problems of the human beings which he is dealing with. He is not concerned about anybody personally as such. His whole concern is to get result anyhow by using the power which he has got, by being in a position, using that power, using coercion, and then somehow getting the results which he has actually envisioned in his mind. This is the traditional model of top to bottom or top to below hierarchy system of leadership. Now, contrasting to this, what do we find in servant leadership? In servant leadership, a person can become a servant leader because a servant leader is a person who wants to serve first. He wants to serve the other person. Now, he also has got a vision. He has got a vision, but he doesn't use the institutional power. He doesn't use the tactics of coercion and forcing other people to get this vision actualized. His method is method of serving others. His method is method of empathizing with others, being concerned with the problems with the people he is dealing with. He is a person who collaborates, who shares, who understands, who respects. There is a sense of mutual respect between this person and the people who he is dealing with. So this is a totally different paradigm of understanding the people whom we are working with, understanding their problems, and the servant leader is a person who facilitates the growth of those people he is dealing with. It is a very wonderful way of looking at things. He is deeply concerned with the problems of his own employees. Usually, if we just look into the big corporations and companies which function in the society, you will see that their first motto is, customer is the God. To please the customer is the main thing. They don't bother about the employees. Whereas the servant leadership model would first say that first employees, then customer. First, our employees have to be happy. They have to be having a happy state of mind. We should be first concerned about their problems, their personal issues, and let them facilitate their personal growth. And when the employees are really satisfied and happy, we find that they automatically will take care of the customers. So this attitude of customer first attitude, which usually we see that customer is the God and we don't bother, right beneath our nose we have our employees everywhere we see. We don't bother about what is the condition in which they are living and what is happening in their families. But the servant leadership attitude is an attitude where you become concerned with your own people first. That's why today we have in the corporate culture, it is very much coming into vogue that we have a family concept. Companies are now today considering themselves to be families. Like the employees are very much, they are a family. And they are deeply concerned with the welfare of each and every employee. When the employee is given the due respect, the due place in the company, automatically that employee, because of the kind of respect, because of the kind of concern he enjoys from the authority, automatically that also comes back in the form of total dedication for the organization, and in and through that, the vision of that organization is actualized in real life. Now let me come to Swami Vivekananda. This is the general idea about what this servant leadership is about. Here the main thing is, it is a method of leading people by the power of your own ethical character, not by the power of institutional power or the position. Your character, your moral and ethical character, your sense of concern for the other person, it is this which actually commands respect from your employees, from the people around you, and in and through that, in an unobtrusive way, In an unconscious way, the servant turns out to become the leader of the group. It is a fantastic method. Now, how do we find this manifesting in Swami Vivekananda's life is something wonderful. Swami Vivekananda writes to his brother, his Alasinga Perumal. You must be knowing, those who have read Swami Vivekananda's life, Alasinga Perumal was one of the foremost dedicated soldiers from Tamil Nadu at that time, Chennai, who has done exemplary work to further Swami Vivekananda's vision of spreading the message of Vedanta in India and abroad. And he was really a soldier, always ready to do the bidding of his master, Swami Vivekananda. To him, Swami Vivekananda writes, "Do not try to lead your brethren, but serve them. The brutal mania for leading has sunk many a great ship in the waters of life." The first thing Swami Vivekananda writes to Alasinga Perumal is, do not try to lead your brethren. Now this Swamiji is actually referring to the traditional mode of leading by coercion, leading by use of institutional power, leading by ego, a ego-centered way of leading others. Please do not try to do that. Swamiji says that serve them. Through and through service, you lead your group. This was the idea which Swami Vivekananda was talking about nearly 80 years before Robert Greenleaf kept this idea of servant leadership before the entire world. Then Swamiji says, now, organize a little society. You will have to take the charge of the whole movement, not as a leader, but as a servant. There are any number of such instances where Swamiji actually talks about this idea of servant leadership, where Swamiji encourages his followers, his soldiers, to lead, but not in the traditional sense, but by the method of being a servant, by serving others. In that way, in an unobtrusive way, unknowingly the person tends to become the leader of the group. Then, once again, he writes to Swami Ramakrishna Ashrama, Shashi Maharaj, a beautiful letter where it says, Swamiji says, it is very difficult task to take on the role of a leader. It is a very difficult task to take the role of a leader. And he says, one must be dasasya dasa, a servant of servants. In Sanskrit, dasasya dasa means servant of the servants, means absolute egolessness, absolutely no sense of me doing something or as if I am doing some favor on somebody, not that way. So here the great Indian ethos of working selflessly, without any selfish motive, just to do something good for the other person, this Indian ethos comes foremost on the front. So Swamiji says, it is very difficult to take the role of a leader. One must be dasasya dasa, a servant of servants, and must accommodate 1,000 minds. There must not be a shade of jealousy or selfishness, then you are a leader. Now, this is the idea of servant leadership which Swamiji had propagated almost 80 years before. Robert Greenleaf kept this idea before the world, and Swamiji himself was one of the greatest exemplary, a role model of this concept of servant leadership. See, in this hall, when I was just sitting here, I was looking at all these wonderful pictures here. All of them were servant leaders actually speaking. You look at these pictures, whether it is Buddha, whether it is Guru Nanak, whether it is Jesus, whether it is Mahavir or Krishna, all of them were servant leaders. Why I am saying they were servant leaders? Their method is never by using institutional power, but their method is selfless service. By serving the community selflessly, you unconsciously, you tend to lead the entire group into furthering that vision which the leader has in his mind. It is a wonderful thing. You see, Swami Vivekananda's vision. What was Swami Vivekananda's vision? And how did he accomplish it in his life? Swamiji, if you just see, what institutional power did he have with him? Was he occupying some power and position? A penniless sannyasi who didn't have anything with him, that sannyasi, how could he start such a great organization and a movement in which slowly and steadily we find People, ranks after ranks of youngsters coming and joining this organization on the dint of what? If we ask this question, it's something wonderful. How did he actually succeed in attracting the attention of so many people who came and joined this movement? By what power? Was he a business magnate? Was he a great political leader? Did he have any support of any government anywhere? Nothing, a penniless sannyasi. But by the sheer dint of his character, his sincerity, his spirituality, and the most important thing, selflessness. Absolutely selfless character. The person who lives only for the good of others. This resonates in his writings and his speeches. We all know that famous letter which he wrote to the Maharaja of Mysore, where Swamiji says, this life is short and the vanities of this world are transient. They alone live who live for others. The rest are more dead than alive. This is the central principle which should guide the servant leader. A servant leader is a person who dedicates his everything for the good of others. Now see, this can be applied to any stream of activity. You can be a doctor, you can be an engineer, you can be a public servant. Just today morning we heard the wonderful talk by our district collector, who spoke about her experiences. What is speciality of that? The person is really concerned about the person, the people whom with he or she is working. He or she is concerned about their personal issues, and she or she is actively involved in facilitating to remove all those problems and challenges which our employees and our co-members are suffering from. This attitude, it is this attitude which actually goes to command and give respect to that person, and the followers, they begin to follow that leader. Now, this is exactly what has happened in Ramakrishna movement. I want you to really understand this very clearly. Individually, if you just look at Swami Vivekananda, he is a person, fine. But this servant leadership, if you just see as a concept, if you take Ramakrishna organization as a person, as an individual, you can say that this Ramakrishna Sangha is one of the finest examples of a servant leadership. Why I am saying, how does this Ramakrishna Sangha function in society, and what is the ideal which it is placing before the entire society? The ideal is of service, selfless service. In every Ramakrishna Mutt and mission centers, you will find hospitals and polyclinics and schools and whatnot. All this is being done. Why? Why? Only to facilitate, to remove the problems of the people. And by doing that selflessly, with a deep sense of concern and sympathy and empathy, and being involved with the problems of day-to-day problems of our own people, what is happening is Ramakrishna Mission's vision. What is that vision? That vision is spirituality. The mission's vision, if you just take Ramakrishna Sangha as a person, as I said, then this person is the leader. And how is this so-called Ramakrishna mission as a person, how is this person leading the society? By selflessly serving the society, by becoming deeply involved with the problems of its own people. People are attracted towards Ramakrishna mission, and they also tend to follow the ideal presented by this great leader called Ramakrishna Mission. This is what is happening. And what is this great vision which Ramakrishna Mission is presenting to the world? The world has to be spiritualized. This great vision, and how is it actualizing? By serving the people, and by people getting attracted toward the mission by this kind of selfless service, they also tend to follow this very vision of spiritualizing the entire world. This is how, a legacy is set in motion. This great servant leader, he sets a legacy. He leaves behind a great example. He himself is a servant leader, and he also sees that his followers also slowly begin to move in the direction of becoming a great servant leader. So, if you just look into this wonderful concept, I would just take one more minute and I will conclude my talk. Swami Vivekananda had this great charge given to him by his guru. That charge was of spreading the message of spirituality to the entire world. And when we go into the core idea of spirituality, you will see that what is spirituality ultimately? Just before coming here, 3 days in the Sagar University, we had a 3-day world conference on Advaita Vedanta. A 3-day world conference and seminar. I also participated in that. The whole stress was on the basic spiritual principle. And what is the basic spiritual idea? The basic spiritual idea is that we are all one. If I have to be happy in life, I have to ensure that everybody is happy. When people around me are weeping and in great trouble, it is just a daydream to think that I'll be happy for my own self. So spirituality essentially concerns with the good of everybody, and that's why to dedicate one's life for the good of others without any selfish interest, this is one of the great spiritual teachings which we find in our literature, which today has to come into the management and leadership theories. And this is what I feel is very important for the present day management and leadership theories, to understand that the best way of leading our own people is not by using institutional power, not by using coercion, but by selflessly being concerned with the good of our own people and doing something for them selflessly, and in and through that, lead the entire community towards a greater future which we all can dream about. Thank you so much.